Hello, gorgeous people, and welcome to another TV Central one-on-one podcast. I'm Aaron Bryan. This is episode 65, 2023. Joining me now is a seasoned actor whose talent knows no bounds, a name that resonates with excellence in the Australian television and film landscape. He has graced both the big screen and small screens, capturing hearts with his remarkable performance and leaving an enduring mark on the world of entertainment. Known for his versatility, he embodies characters with both depth and authenticity. From Sons and Daughters to A Country Practice, The Flying Doctors and A Place to Call Home, the feature film Archer with Nicole Kidman, and appearances in pretty much every well-known Australian production. I am talking about, of course, Australian screen royalty, Brett Climo. Brett joins me now here at TV Central. Brett, thanks for joining me.
Oh, thank you so much. You've made my day. What a lovely welcome. Thank you so much. It's very kind.
No worries. Well, your career started with A Country Practice, but not in the way people know. We will get to that. But let me ask you, let's go right back about growing up, because unfortunately, tragedy struck pretty young for you. Hey, didn't it?
Yeah, well, it did. I was 3 years old when my father died water skiing. He suffered a stroke and on a family outing on a Sunday in the Hawkesbury River. And but obviously I was three, so I don't quite register the tragedy of it. However, my mum was a young woman in her early 20s or mid 20s rather, with three children. I have two older sisters, and she was left alone to look after us. And I suppose. And I was raised then by three lovely, strong women, I suppose. And so from a very young age, I've always seen the world through almost the eyes of women. And so I will always see a female's point of view, even though I'm a male. But I'll always see that point of view almost instantly or first, if you know what I mean. Which is kind of weird, but it's often influenced, choices I've made with the acting, or the roles that I've wanted to play or how I've wanted to play them.
I love the language you use when talking about your mother. Actually, I've seen in previous interviews, I've seen quotes such as wonderfully grounded, strong, decisive. I mean, as you said, growing up in the 60s and 70s, let's face it, it was a man's world, but your mum had a strong ethic, but also a graceful femininity. Would that be a fair comment?
Oh, definitely. Extremely feminine, but also would be able to tile the bathroom because necessity she had to. I remember putting together a dining room table out of nothing really, because there wasn't a lot of money going around, and she was working two jobs, and she was able to turn a hand to anything just to get through. But there was there was always grace. There was always determination, but with grace. And there was a bad decision with a particular marriage, and that gentleman was not a kind sort of man. So I also saw firsthand that type of male behaviour, which to this day I have no tolerance for. And once again, that's also informed how I view things, and the types of roles that I want to play and don't want to play. But I in the early days of TV land, it was a fairly macho kind of environment, and I do remember not having a lot of tolerance for that either. However, things have definitely changed, thankfully. Yeah.
Were you spoiled as a kid, being the only boy, surrounded by your mum Nancy and your sisters?
Definitely. My older sister Deanne and the younger one Annette, they're both older, and my mum. Yeah, I have to admit, I was just spoiled, and um, yeah, I was. What can I say? Yeah, I think to this day, probably as well. I think they would say I got off, lightly with most things. Yeah, but look. Having said that, it was a lovely childhood, and there was freedom to explore all sorts of things, and certainly when the school environment wasn't one that I was enjoying too much, my mother um, encouraged me. I don't quite know why. I think perhaps I was on the debating team, but we are talking about Engadine High School, which is in the southern suburbs of Sydney. So when I say debating team, don't think posh private school thing. This was fairly rough and tumble, and but for whatever reason, I was in that team, and Mum got wind of that, and I don't know. I think we talked about journalism or something like this, or some kind of options, and she enrolled me in a drama course called Cornstalks at the Opera House for some reason. I don't know. So I front up to this drama course for kids on a Saturday morning, and it was kind of fun. But what I found more intriguing is they were using video cameras to tape performances, and I kind of thought dramas, I thought I would all be, on stage and whatever. But this wasn't. This was all about having fun with cameras, and I quite enjoyed that aspect of it because I dislike being in front of people, and so I was petrified going to this class because I thought, oh goodness, I'm going to have to get up and do things, but it wasn't like that at all. And one thing led to another, and I heard these other kids talking about doing auditions or casting calls for commercials and all that sort of stuff, and I thought, hey, that sounds kind of interesting. So without my mother knowing, and I think I was in about, I don't know, Form 3 or something like this, Form 4 maybe, and I wagged a day off school. I just took a day off school, and these kids had given me some addresses and numbers of agents, kids agents, and I caught the train into the city, and I door knocked. I think
Wow.
I had a photograph, and one very kind lady called Linda Keane, who owned a studio back then called Keane Kids, opened the door and said, "Yeah, okay, why don't you go and get some photographs done?" So got the photographs done, joined the agency. Mum was rather horrified that I'd taken the day off school, but I think within a week I got a casting for I think an ice cream commercial or something like that. And I remember, my mother and my lovely stepfather, who's very much still part of my life, and he is he's a beautiful man. David drove me to Lane Cove to shoot this TV commercial, and I think I was paid about, I think it was $600 or something like that, which was a big deal back then. And once again, though, it was this idea of being, cameras and how easy it was for me just to do it. I didn't think about it, and I thought it was fun, and that then led to some extra work. I remember being an extra on The Restless Years, and I was in a cafe scene with a cold cappuccino in front of me, and I was watching Peter Phelps, who is
Yeah.
who I respect enormously, by the way, and Peter and I, acquaintances, of course. But back then, I remember watching him perform, thinking, yeah, that doesn't look that hard. I'm sure that. And that was it, really, Aaron. I think I started getting more small pieces of work, and it was also it was an out for me for school because I for whatever reason I wasn't enjoying school. I wasn't bad at it. In fact, I was okay at it, but I just didn't see the relevance, to be quite honest. And so once I found this thing called acting, which wasn't really acting back then, but one thing led to another. And I remember I managed to get a role in a short film called Times Are Changing, which was directed by a woman called Mitch Matthews, whose husband was the Kennedy and Kennedy Miller, the producers. He died in a helicopter accident, and Mitch pursued her own career then as a director. And anyway, she cast me in this short film and had Max Cullen in it, Betty Cheal, and a couple of other quite talented people who rallied around to support Mitch because she was such a fine woman. And she wrote this gorgeous script too. It actually won a few awards. I contacted somebody at the ABC for their suggestions about new management because I thought that it was time to get a sort of a grown-up agent. And thanks to that short film, I had something to show. And a lady called Robin Gardner. Back then it was Robin Gardner and Ross Spears. It was Gardner and Spears Agency that's now RGM, that now handles the likes of Kate Blanchett. And she signed me on, and I think we were one of 13 back then. And that's pretty much the start of my journey, I suppose, as an actor in this country. Yeah.
You made a comment there. It was almost a throwaway comment of it wasn't really acting back then. What do you mean by that?
I wasn't really thinking about what I was doing. I was completely naturalistic and wasn't really thinking too much about it. So you then reach a point, though, I suppose, with the movie times are changing, when you're being directed and you're being asked to interpret and in your own way. Interpret means you make a decision how to play that. That's when it's becoming acting. That's when you start choosing and you start having some awareness of what you're portraying. And I remember wanting to look back at the replaying of a shot, and I'd with the camera people and the director, not so much to look at myself, but to see if what I was trying to achieve was working. And vanity completely aside, it was more about the purely technical aspect of, did that glance, did that look, did that I really wanted to know how to use that camera, and because it's such a powerful piece of it's powerful because it gets so close that you from a very young age, I kind of like this idea of not doing that much, and seeing how not powerful, well, I guess how if that can be just as powerful as not as doing a lot. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. Did your mum Nancy ever try to coax you out of acting, as they would say back then, to get a real job, or were you and your sisters always supported in anything you wanted to do?
Yeah, this gets back to the question you asked 5 minutes ago, which was about the support and the freedom I had during you could say turbulent times, a turbulent time, but there was always support to freedom to try things, I suppose. But when I found this, I think my mum realized that I was fairly serious about it, and I was very committed to it. And then when I started working more, and certainly when the Sons and Daughters scripts started to arrive, at home, via, the mail, and here are these scripts, pile of scripts that and a contract for 3 months, whatever it was. I think then they all knew it was pretty serious for me, and certainly I'd left school by then. So every day I think I'd learned to drive by then, but I think I was borrowing my mum's car, to drive to the studios at Epping and to film Sons and Daughters, and so there you are. There's support once again. It's an interesting story. I hadn't thought about this for so long until we'd arranged to talk, Aaron, and you just start reminiscing and thinking about all these things, and the pieces start getting put in place, really. Perhaps I wasn't quite as grateful as I should have been for all the support, by the way.
That's with both kids. What was the first, I guess, production or performance you did where the feedback was so positive that you thought, I might have a chance at this.
Um, oh, look, I suppose it was probably something like Sons and Daughters. Because it was a 3-month contract, and I think the character kind of worked quite well. Funnily enough, I was playing the son of quite a brutal man, a lovely man, a lovely actor, by the way, called Paul Killer, a New Zealand actor, a fine actor who came across to play this role, and he was an abusive father, and I do remember at the time thinking, having experienced something a little similar, this is kind of weird, which perhaps made the acting not quite so hard. But I think the character worked. I think the character became quite popular. And then when I had decided, my agent, Robin, then decided it was maybe time to move on to other things. I do know they wanted me to stay, and they offered me another contract, and we said no. And then I do remember a week later, when I was helping my uncle on a building site carting rubbish, I rang my agent and I said, "Look, I really don't know if I made the right decision. Can we call them back?" And she said, "What? Are you serious? You don't do that. And no, that is not this world. We've passed on that. We're moving on. We certainly can't go back." And that was a great lesson for me.
I believe your first major credited role was in A Country Practice, but it wasn't in a role that made you a household name. You appeared in the show in 1982 in a 2-part episode, a full 5 years before you would play
Correct.
Michael. How did that come about? How did you land that guest role?
That came about because I did some extra work in A Country Practice. I do apologize. I'm reason cloudy of the dates, and you can ask me now. We just had a wedding anniversary this week, 27 years on Friday, and my sister called me to remind me, and I had to say how many years. So I have no idea of time. So when we talk about these times, yeah, you're right. I did some extra work in A Country Practice. And a really fine director who became the producer was a man called Bruce Best. And he saw on that day of me playing an extra that I was really willing and open to to do more. And so they needed somebody in a bus scene. It was an episode about Shane Porteous's daughter, and she was on a bus having troubles or whatever. So there was a bus full of kids. And he saw something in me, so I became that day a bit of what they call a featured extra, which is a bit more money. It means that your face gets on camera, and I think I said a couple of words. And he remembered me from that episode and as being an extra. And then when it came time for a casting for a guest over the two episodes that you were talking about, he cast me to play that role. And that was, I suppose you're right. That was the first time. That was the first time I got a credit. And it was, once again, that was a great experience, and I felt as though I was on my way as well. Yeah, I actually, in those days with those long episodic dramas, you'd often, for me anyway, I actually featured twice in A Country Practice before I landed the role as Michael Langley. There was another one on horseback. I remember I was a young guy injured on a horse and got brought into the hospital, and I don't quite know what that storyline was, but I do remember the first one was about teenage pregnancy. That was the double episode, and the second one was something to do with a horse.
That actually was going to be my next question, because if it wasn't strange enough, obviously not playing Michael in A Country Practice beforehand, you did come back for that 2-parter in 1984 as another character. I'm just trying to imagine the conversation. Like, Brett, you were great 2 years ago in that guest role, and we've since seen you on Sons and Daughters. We don't want to quite give you a full-time role yet, but can you come back for a second time and play a different character? Was it something like that?
It was in those days. It was going from one thing to another. You didn't quite think about it. In fact, I certainly never thought I'd be cast as one of the leads in the country practice. I didn't think I was doing any sort of apprenticeship. No, I didn't. I Goodness me, that would have been quite yeah, that would have been quite interesting. But no, I wasn't even thinking that far ahead, to be honest. Although I would always look around, at the regular actors and really see their comfortability and their ownership of the studio and the confidence that they had. Because as a guest, I call it one of the hardest jobs in television, because you are literally arriving on set into a very, very well oiled machine, and you have to hop in there, and you have to be part of that machine. You have to pretend at least that it's seamless, that you are one of that part of that. And it's a very, very difficult thing to do, because not only have you got the acting in your mind and the lines in your mind, you also need to appear on screen as though you are united and very much part of this ensemble. And I'd remember as the young guy back then, looking at the team and thinking, there was probably a thought like, I'd love to be part of that. I'd love to arrive every day and have the confidence, the knowing, the security, I suppose, as well. So there were probably times when I thought, wouldn't that be fun? And then, of course, once again, thanks to, sorry, Aaron, I'm about to lead on then. I'll go back to you. What would you like? Sorry.
No. It's your podcast. What were you going to mention?
Well, I was going to then say that, and once again, there was a lot in between. There was the miniseries Vietnam that we did. There was Archer. There was Chase Through the Night, another thing with Nicole Kidman. So there was lots of stuff going on, really. And around the Archer time, I met my current person, Michelle, and my wife, and we started living together. And I was off doing various acting jobs and here and there, and Bruce Best, the gentleman that directed those earlier episodes of A Country Practice where I was the guest, he was now producing A Country Practice, and they wanted to cast this role of Michael Langley. And so Bruce, I believe I put down an audition, but I'm under the impression that he pretty much knew that he wanted me to play it. I don't know why I felt very confident that there wasn't too many other candidates. And at the time, I mentioned having met Michelle because the idea of security and wanting to provide, even at that early age, was quite interesting. I thought it was a perfect opportunity to kind of not help my relationship, but really provide something for her and us, and also, move ahead with my career. At the time, I was in the group of fairly, I wouldn't say serious, but not really alternative either, but young actors that were very much about theatre and very much about film and very much about alternative drama. And the idea of doing commercial television within my group was something it was not the thing to do, believe it or not. And I remember making that decision, thinking I'm choosing a different way, and knowing I was moving then into a different world, really, but a world that I really welcomed. And when I was cast in the role, I was the happiest guy. Yeah, it was a major, for all sorts of reasons. It was a really major time for me, a real turning point, in fact.
Mm.
Mm.
When you came onto the show, the show was certainly at its peak. You were coming in after Molly had died in the show. Tell me about your memories on set. I mean, it's a massive cast. Was it a big family, or did the core team kind of separate themselves from the revolving cast? What was the feel like on set?
It was incredibly welcoming. I think in fact, they remembered me from the past couple of roles. So
Really?
yeah, yes, that was nice, and because I need to say that those smaller roles that I was playing, I was watching everything, and I was very much the person to listen and to ask questions. I never took anything for granted, so there were probably some serious conversations if they could be bothered, without being too ingratiating. But I think I probably had some conversations with some of the cast members about acting and about, because I was committed and I was very interested, and I just thought, as long as you're on set, you can learn, as long as you're not a pain in the neck. So I think probably when I arrived on set as a regular, I think there was probably an idea that I was pretty serious and I was there for the right reasons. And in fact, that show, all of the actors were there for the right reasons. When I say that, I mean they were about their craft. They were about making the show work. They worked incredibly hard, but it was fun. But I do remember it just being welcoming, and it was a family. I know it's a cliche, but it was. There weren't any pockets here, pockets there. It was one lovely group of actors playing, and it was just fun. Particularly that nurses set, the hospital set. It was a lot of fun, and immediately I felt really comfortable to start really exploring the acting stuff and improvising at certain moments if you were allowed. Everything was scripted, but once I was there for a little while and once I knew the character a little more, I really felt the freedom to start just trying inventing a few things. I remember poring over the script at night, just looking for moments to enhance Michael, just to, because I wasn't quite, I hadn't realized that I'd signed on to play such, goodness me, a free spirit, in a sense that he arrived on a motorbike from Bribey Island. He was a trained nurse, but he was all about the free spirit. He was what I'm trying to say is completely unlike myself. I had to try and work out how to play this extrovert, and because I'm not, and I found it quite worrying in the beginning. I really didn't think I could do it. I remember the first scene on my first day. I had to entertain a young girl, a young patient, with a puppet show, and it was like, oh my God, I've never done this in my life. I don't know how to do this. This isn't me, but somehow I managed to fake that, and it worked. And so gradually I became more comfortable playing this kind of this extrovert, this free spirit and humorous kind of guy, and kind of in a way then started liking playing something that was reasonably different from myself. But then I was able to center him, and I really, it was written for me as well. But there was a lovely sensitive quality to Michael, which I very much enjoyed playing. So we were able to find the balance of this at times free-spirited, doesn't think too much, doesn't plan too much, but we could earth him with a real sense of sensitivity. And it's funny, I've only just thought about this now because you don't think about it at the time, but they would have been thinking a long time, how can we look after the character of Jo Loveday, such a loved, respected, lovely young character? How do we look after her when we introduce a romance for her? Who can that be? And you don't think about the responsibility at the time, because to be honest with you, I hadn't watched the show, because at the age of 23, 24, at 7:30 at night, you're not around, meaning television.
Yeah.
So that important decision of who to introduce I hadn't thought about it until I was planning to chat with you, and it was just only yesterday, in fact, I thought, oh, okay, well that was probably really that they probably needed somebody that was a good match for her and that was sensitive and whatever to look after her in a way, to what's the word, protect that character in the public's eye, for the public, if you know what I mean. You know, that decisions that the producers really have to make when they're pairing people up. Or in the beginning, of course, you didn't know that Jo and Michael were going to get together, but that was that was always going to happen, and that's the long-term plan. And yeah, so that and it was a joy working with Jo, I've got to say. For such when I use the word petite, I mean it physically. She's such a petite girl, and to look at photographs and whatever, and then to arrive on set with her professionalism was something that struck me. You know, she was playing I wouldn't say naive character, but a fairly let's just say that her professionalism and her acting technique, she knew exactly what she was doing, and I had so much respect for that. It was I really enjoyed that meeting that and okay, so you play this type of character, but this is very much a character, and I thought that was wonderful. Having said that, Jo was absolutely adorable and the most wonderful person to work with and kind, and but she was certainly playing a character, and as I say, I respected that.
Well, I certainly have to talk about obviously Jo Mitchell, who played Jo Loveday. So Australia fell in love with Michael and Jo as they fell in love with each other. So tell me about working with Jo. I mean, you have mentioned a lot there, but just in terms of, there would have been a lot of media and stuff coming out. I mean, did you sort of just kind of stick together and work together through, obviously through scenes, but through media, through fans and all that kind of stuff? Because it would have been new to both of you.
Jo was fairly seasoned at it. She was, I think her popularity on the show was on the rise, certainly well before I was. So in fact, I would look to how she would often handle these things. The older cast members didn't quite have the same what's the word? Publicists use cast members in a different way, and they use the older cast members in a different way, so they use the younger ones. So there was lots of weekend press stuff. There was going to various fairs and yeah. So I suppose and Kate, we've got to Kate Razon was part of that team as well, and John Tarrant, but later became part of that team. But certainly Jo and I were at the forefront of a lot of the media, and we were in it together. But once again, it was always done with such professionalism. We really saw it as being part of the job. It wasn't party time. It wasn't, oh, isn't this fun having 1,000 people to sign autographs. It was never that. It was always, this is part of the job. And it was never about popularity anyway. I learned very quickly, and I had no idea of publicity myself. The stuff I'd done, I was never really the lead anyway, so I didn't have to worry about replying to lovely people's letters and whatever. And then you're actually schooled in it. You have a publicist, and this is your obligations, and you're part of this now. And I suppose because that came as a surprise to me, because I had no idea how popular the show was. It was a welcome surprise in a way, but it meant that I was, as I said before, I was there for all the right reasons. I was there for my acting. I was there to learn more. The fact that it was a very popular show, I welcomed that, and I love people coming up telling me how much they enjoyed the show. I never have a problem with that, but it was very much part of the job, the publicity, and also because we had very solid relationships, it was work for us too. So Jo and I, we didn't socialize, but that had nothing to do with not wanting to. It was simply that we had our own lives. So whether it was a press junket to Brisbane Often Michelle would come with me, Chris would come with her, and we may share a dinner, but usually it was knock-off time. We'd go home, and even traveling interstate to do telethons, as we used to do back then. It was very much about, okay, what time are we're leaving at this time, we're arriving this time, that's all we're doing, then we're out, whatever. It was all very professional, is what I'm getting at, and and I think that made our relationship on screen even better, because we'd arrive on set fresh and with ideas and I think it sometimes helps to, for me anyway, I've never been the one to socialize after work. I've always kept work. It's probably my upbringing as well, and the way that I entered the industry. It was a job, and I wasn't there for the people. I wasn't there for the party. I was there to work, and that's always been my ethic. So when the work stops, I go home. And to this day, that's how I operate. And back then, Jo did as well, and we got along really well because of that.
You were in 121 episodes of A Country Practice. Now, that sounds like a lot, but I had a look, and that ranks you like number 30 in terms of episodes appeared in. Nowhere near the 900 plus episodes for like Shane Porteous and Brian Wenzel. Respect to those actors and people like Ray Maher on Home and Away. But can you even imagine doing something like that? I mean, I haven't counted the number of roles that you've been in, but it is well over 50. Do you like that different character, different set, different challenge, different people kind of thing?
When you're younger, I think so. I mean, that was my primary reason for leaving A Country Practice. That's another story, quite a funny one, but maybe we'll move on to that later. But the older you become, I look at Ray and I think Ray Maher, and I can understand why he's doing that. He's at a time in his life where, that traveling around and to rock up to work every day or 2 or 3 days a week and know the scene so well. I could I do that? I'm really not sure at the moment. I'm not sure at the moment, but I do understand it. When you're younger, you want to try different things and you do want to move around. And I certainly felt that I didn't want to stay too long in any one role. But the reason I hope you don't mind, I will tell the story because it's quite an odd one, but it's true.
No, of course.
I was on A Country Practice, and we came down to Melbourne for the Logie Awards. And it was towards the end of the night, and there may or may not have been a few glasses of wine. And a lovely woman called Lynn Bayonis came up to me and said, "Look, I'm producing The Flying Doctors now. We'd love to have you." And I said, "I beg your pardon." She said, "Oh, yeah, your Country Practice is all well and good, but we're rebooting The Flying Doctors, and we're shooting on film, and it would be a different experience for you." And I have to say that prior to this, I'd worked in Melbourne a few times, and I'd fallen in love with the city. And I remember thinking to myself, if ever I had a chance to work in Melbourne for a longer period of time, gosh, wouldn't that be fun? So that was a Sunday night, and I remember flying back to Sydney on Monday, and I called my agent. I said, "Look, I had a weird experience last night. Is there a producer called Lynn Bayonis?" She said, "Yes, she's producing The Flying Doctors." I said, "It was late in the night, but she said that they might want to, there might be a role for me in that show." And she said, "What?" Well, one thing led to another, and phone calls were made, and sure enough, there was an offer to go and do the show. So that was the only reason I left A Country Practice, because I thought, getting back to our earlier conversation, the field is greener, and it's a new experience, and I'll be working on film as opposed to videotape. Country Practice is videotape in studio. This was location work, one camera. I'd learned a lot more, I'd always wanted to be doing more film. You show, Reboot, Melbourne. So it sort of ticked a lot of the boxes, really, and that was the reason. I do remember James Davin, who produced A Country Practice at the time, calling my agent and saying, "What the hell is he doing?" I mean, I believe at the time Jo wanted to leave A Country Practice, so she was out anyway, but they wanted me to stay. And he tried to convince us to stay with the show, but I just had this thing in his bee in my bonnet about Melbourne and a new experience, and I don't know. And to this day, Aaron, you have those moments. I have moments where I think, what if I'd stayed? Because as we all know, the Flying Doctors didn't turn out to be the reboot they wanted it to be. It kind of struggled, really, as reboots tend to. But I didn't have that knowledge at the time, of course. So I do often, and will say to Michelle at times, what if we'd stayed in Sydney, and what if I'd stayed with A Country Practice? And but then the answer to that is, well, I've got a lovely life in Melbourne. We had wonderful friendships in Melbourne, and it's been a great, 25 years, 30 years, whatever it's been. So that's the answer. But there's always the what ifs in life for everyone.
But I guess also for the fans, if you look back, I mean, it was from memory, you two riding off in the sunset together. It would have been interesting if one had stayed, and I don't know, divorce. I don't know what you're gonna do.
Well, I don't know. What perhaps they've maybe Jo. She may have died. I don't know. Divorce. You're right. That wouldn't have gone down well.
No,
but I do remember that final day of filming the wedding, and it was such a. They're always so protracted because there's so many people, and you've got to cover. You got to film everybody, and there's reverses. But the day just went on. But it was a great day, though, in retrospect. I mean, we had a lot of fun knowing it was our last scene, and it was, it was quite a little bit emotional, I think. And but I do remember when it finished. That Friday, I came home, and I think we went out to dinner, and that was that. I woke up on Saturday, and that was over, and I was moving on to something else. It was as clean cut as that. It's probably only in hindsight that I miss it, if you know what I mean. Because if I was having a ball doing the show, and getting back to that earlier conversation we had about the comfortability, and when I was the young actor, looking at the people on set being so comfortable and controlling the environment, I had achieved that, and I suppose it empowered me to go off down to Melbourne and pursue the new role with a lot of confidence, and knowing that a team wanted me. There wasn't anybody else for the role. They wanted me, and that was quite empowering, and in a good way. So if you look at the experience of A Country Practice, immeasurable, really, what it gave me in terms of confidence, in terms of experience, knowledge of the camera. Because in those days, Aaron, you had 3 cameras on the studio floor, and there would be playbacks. So you'd play back, they'd play back to the cast and to the technicians on set what you'd just shot. And I used to love that, because once again, you could see what you were trying to achieve. Did it work? Didn't it work? And it was, I learned so much in that process. And to this day, I'll often have directors say to me, actually, no, I don't think we got that. And I said, we have got it. When you trust me, it's there. You will see what I'm doing. It's going to be okay. But in those days, it was immediate. You could see it immediate. But of course, now they don't do playbacks anymore. But it gave you the confidence to know the muscles that you had, and the technique to convey and to achieve what the writers wanted. And you could see it for yourself. Whereas now, there's a time lapse, of course, except when you're on a film set, you can there are playbacks. But no, it was a wonderful experience for so many reasons.
Quite often when someone makes it like a big time in a show like A Country Practice, it often defines them, and work can actually dry up despite their popularity or their typecast. You obviously went on to main or recurring roles in The Flying Doctors, Blue Heelers, Stingers, All Saints, and then, of course, returning to the lead in A Place to Call Home.
Oh, well.
What do you think was the key to the longevity success?
Um, oh, that's a really good question. Maybe because I didn't hang around too long. Look, I'll give you a story though. My contract in the Flying Dog. I don't know if I ever. My friends joke about this, but I don't think I've ever told anyone like you this before. My contract in the Flying Doctors wasn't renewed. I just purchased a new property, our first property in Melbourne, and thinking that I was on for another 3 years. And I got the call, I think literally the day we signed to buy the home, rather this tiny flat in downtown Windsor. And to say, my agent, Robin, rang to say we're not going ahead. And I said, what? They said, no, they've decided not to renew your contract. And I was devastated. I can't describe my feelings. And basically, you're given the sack. And I'd thought about it, and obviously I had meetings with my agent, and what I planned to do with that character. And I know this chat is about a country practice, but the reason I wanted to do the Flying Doctors is that I actually wanted to play a completely different type of man. I wanted to play an introvert. I wanted to play this doctor who I thought, wouldn't it be interesting to make it difficult for the audience to like you? And I didn't quite realize that, in fact, they probably just wanted me to play Michael Langley again. And I didn't. I wanted to play someone far more serious and that was not that comfortable in his skin, possibly something closer to myself. And let's just say that I don't think it worked. I quite enjoyed doing it, but I remember constantly being told to lighten up or more energy, and I didn't want to do that. Quite interesting choice, really. But once again, it was about the acting. I just wanted to play someone. I wanted to play a different type of male on screen. I wanted to make it difficult. I wanted to go against what I found so easy to do. By the end of a country practice, I was just finding it very easy to play that. And I suppose I just wanted to give myself an obstacle, perhaps, or make it more interesting for myself. Anyway, when I chatted to my agent about why and when, she said, well, because you didn't smile enough. She said, you've got a really nice smile, Brett. You didn't smile enough. She said, I know it's a lot more than that. And Robin's a very serious agent, don't get me wrong. But basically, and that was a lesson too. You've got these attributes, apparently. You got to use them once in a while. Otherwise, you can have all the acting technique you want, but if people aren't responding to what you're doing, then. So that was a learning lesson as well. But you're right, things went on. I mean, I think I did some interviews at the time saying that it was, how do you want to handle it? And I said, I'd quite like the idea that it was my decision to move on. So therefore, I think in TV Week it was Brett's decision to move on, and but that wasn't really the case.
Oh. Well, of course, there was A Place to Call Home. Now, I'm not an actor. I didn't live that experience, but through my eyes, it feels like you struck gold. A beautiful setting, and then absolutely super talented and gorgeous Marta Dusseldorp, Noni Hazelhurst. I love David Berry too, Aaron Pedersen. Well,
Yes.
was it as magic getting that role as it's going on in my mind?
Yeah, it was. I got a call to say they'd like to audition you for this new Channel 7 season or a series. And don't forget, I'd been out of the acting world for in that kind of league for a while. I've done some interesting ABC work. I think we'd done an Underbelly, which was with Sean Seat director. That was a wonderful experience. So I was actually doing quite interesting work, but nothing large, and certainly nothing that kept me busy. There were a few years where I was certainly doing other things, which is what I do now. And I was doing one of these other things when I got the call, and I said, look, so they sent me the scripts, and I remember reading them, and I thought, oh my Lord, this is beautiful. This is just the character. I understood the character. The world they were creating was an international world. It was a big world, Aaron. It wasn't what's the word? It wasn't small picture. It was big picture. We're talking about post-war. We're talking about a woman coming back from Europe. We're talking about issues that we don't normally talk about in a local drama. And that was my fear. I thought, well, look, it reads beautifully, but this has to be somewhere else. This can't be Channel 7, because I don't think they don't do this. This doesn't say commercialism to me. This is beautiful. This is kind of the closest often when you read a film, TV script, or particularly television script, you don't see art. You don't correlate art with TV. This is one of those times where on the page, I saw the beauty, I saw the rhythm, I saw the visual, I saw it as a lovely piece of art. And I really wanted to be part of it, to the point where I said to my agent, I like this too much. I don't want to, if this is a cattle call, I don't want to be part of it. I need to know that I have a shot. Otherwise, I don't want to invest in this, because I'm happy doing other things. That's what I'm like. If I'm not acting, I'm out of that world and I'm doing other things. No, they do want to see you. So I, went down went to Melbourne. I went across town and put down the audition and whatever. I thought it was okay. And I think 2 months went by. Nothing, not even nothing. So of course and I'd call and say, they said, no, sorry, we think it's gone away. Okay, so I just move on. And then 2.5 months later, another phone call. They'd like to fly you up to Sydney again to audition you again for A Place to Call Home. So look, I auditioned 3 months ago. Nothing. I know, but they've had a change of thought. And I said, once again, this is a serious investment for me. I'm not hopping on a plane if no, really, it's very close. It's very, very close. It's like, it was the strangest experience, Aaron, because there's no interest at all, and then suddenly, and so of course that was the plane. You're spending time flying somewhere. It's serious. You're close to it, and once again, it just opens up all the possibilities of being part of this wonderful show after so many years of not doing anything. And what a lovely place to land again, and whatever. So we auditioned, and I auditioned with Marta and with David. The audition with Marta went very, very well. I remember Chris Martin Jones, Joe, as you know, Jo Mitchell's husband, was in the room. And we made him cry. And then I remember having a scene with David, and he was remarkable. And I think Chris cried again. And I left, having done the job and feeling pretty happy about it. But once again, you hop on the plane and all you can think about is, wow, I've invested again. And you have to understand that if you're busy all the time, then knockbacks don't matter so much. But when you aren't that busy, they matter a lot. Anyway, a few days went by, no, probably longer than that, and I'd call, and that's that awful thing of when you're not part of the acting world, you don't have to make the phone calls to your agent saying any news. And it's any actor knows this, and for the listening. Our listening friends, I know it's a cliche, but you actually do when you can say any news, and you try to say other words and rephrase it, but essentially you just want to know, is there any news? Mm-hmm. And of course, no, we're going to call you if there's news, but you can't help yourself sometimes. But I think on this occasion I did refrain, and a few weeks later, I was doing my other work, and I got a call, and I saw the number. I thought, oh no, and. I remember, I remember my agent Elle just saying, it's yours, and I get emotional about it, because it was a real moment when I got that, and it was a long time for me not to be part of something, and question. You start to question all sorts of things, and then to be given this opportunity was in something so special too, was remarkable. It was certainly a very happy household here when we got that news, and as I say, once again, the only fear was whether, in fact, a local, Channel 7 could fulfill the brief, I suppose. And they did. We arrived in Sydney and we looked at the sets that they'd built. The sets were extraordinary. The largest, most glamorous sets I'd ever seen in my life. And the amount of money they spent on them, the amount of money they were pouring into the production, the costume department, the art department was something else. And I knew then that they were serious about this show. And then, of course, you realise Noni's part of it, and Frankie's part of it, Deborah's part of it, and the young, David, Abby, Arianwen, such talented young people. They just assembled a truly remarkable cast, who, once again, to use the phrase, they were there for the right reasons. And we worked very, very hard, and we knew the pressure, but it was fun at the same time. And I'd never been part of something new before. I'd never been part of a new drama. So to be part of something and to create something that I think was a bit of a first, I think, for us in this country, for commercial television at least, was something else. It was tremendous. And Roger Hodgman directed the first episode, and I'd worked with Roger a couple of times before, and the opening couple of episodes were quite languid. They were romantic for Marta and George, and there was a real kind of pace about them that was slow and meandering and large S in its cinematic form in a way. We thought we were making a feature film. Well, as it turned out, I think we'd been over time by about 15 minutes, so we actually had to go back and reshoot it. And the direction was keep it quick, move it along, and that was interesting. What you've got on the page is something that reads like out of Africa. Once again, don't forget, this is commercial television, and we have ads, and so that was an interesting moment for me. I thought, okay, we are producing this beautiful, this large, gorgeous thing, voluptuous and textured, but once again, this is commercial television with ads in between. And I don't know if that resonates with you, but it kind of brings you back down to earth a little bit. And I suppose that leads us to the next part of the story, which is after 2 seasons of extraordinary ratings in the first one, and maybe slightly dipping to about 900, I think we were rating on a Sunday evening, and that was over 1 million in the first season. It would dip to around 900 in the second, and that was a good enough reason for them to cancel the show. And the idea being that it wasn't skewing to the demographic that the network wanted. And of course, my question to that was, well, why produce a period drama, post-war Australia, dealing with all sorts of cultural issues, and you're actually trying to appeal to, a teenage audience? That was something that, so that was an incredible disappointment. And a couple of times it was going to be resurrected. And once again, we were all having private phone calls to each other saying, this is going to happen. Should we do this? Can't we? Whatever. And then along comes Foxtel and to save the day. And a guy called Brian Walsh, who obviously is no longer with us, but what a beautiful man and what a great visionary all throughout his career. And he certainly had vision with A Place to Call Home, because the very audience that Channel 7 didn't want to attract was the very audience that Foxtel did want to attract. shall we say, a slightly more sophisticated. No, I shouldn't say that. I'm joking, but a more discerning, shall we say?
Yeah.
That's slightly older, whatever. Good taste people. So we were back on track again, which was terrific. If there's, please ask some questions in there because there's probably stuff you want to know.
No, they're all good. I found it interesting that you said when you originally got the script that, oh, this is not a Channel 7 show. It seems like you were onto something because it didn't end up being a Channel 7 show after 2 seasons because of, as you say, demographics and stuff like that. It went on to Foxtel. I am looking at the time with you and very grateful to have a spend time with you. I did want to pick up on something that you said earlier that in between these shows you were doing other things and you enjoy doing those other things. What are those other things?
I play around with once again, I've never really spoken about my other work, but I do some hard work. I staircases. I sand and stain staircases. I like working with wood, and I work with a lovely guy, a mate of mine, a friend who has a lovely business, and it's kind of very much a sideline, but it's under the radar, and I don't really have to deal with people. I just go about my work, and hence we couldn't catch up yesterday because I had a little bit of a disaster, but I managed to rectify that. So I have a completely different world. I love being physical, and I love working on my own. It's a world away from acting, and what it gives me freedom to not do the things that I don't want to do. And I've always said that after A Place to Call Home, and even before then, it was nice for someone to say, "Oh, we haven't seen you for a while," and I like that idea rather than turning up doing little bits and pieces where my heart's not really in it, just to be around or just because I need to. So when I found this little passionate gig on the side, which I quite enjoy doing, it gives me protection, and I don't want to hop into anything anymore, just anything, if you know what I mean. I'm waiting for a place to call home. And if that doesn't arrive, that's okay. I'm in the mix for something at the moment, a Tasmanian number, which reads very interesting, and they particularly would like to see me and probably a few other people too, and that's nice. And it's small, but it's a nice little package for me. I think it fits. I fit well into it. Fingers crossed. So I just want to be. I want to be discerning about what I turn up in. I as I said when we were finishing A Place to Call Home, which was Bevan's call to do that. Well, that's kind of, it was also a very, very expensive show to make. Let's face it. Very expensive. I remember saying it's a bit like a piece of art. What do you put next to that lovely piece of art? I'm not talking about my work. I'm actually talking about the show A Place to Call Home. What you do next after that, I think, is, for me anyway, is just really important. What you turn up in. Now, that's because I have the luxury of not having to act to earn a living at the moment. And that's why I very much like being able to have something else to do, because it allows me to be discerning. Yeah, it's important to me.
While you're in Tasmania having a bit of a look around, there's always Bay of Fires season 2 with the gorgeous Marta Dusseldorp.
Yeah.
You can pop in there. They filmed down there.
Congratulations, Marta. She's a fabulous person. She's what can I say? She's beautiful. She's stylish. She's talented. I do remember being on set with Marta and Noni and just feeling way out of my depth, and I had to lift my game. I really had to lift my game playing with those two, and that was probably a good thing. But but it was lovely watching them work. The nuance in their work and the articulation. And Marta is possibly one of the most gifted screen actors I think I've ever had the joy to watch. What she can do in with very little in a close up is something else. Uh, she's wonderful, and she's also one of the funniest women I think I've ever met. She has an extraordinary sense of humor.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Finally, as we wrap up, you are heading, I believe, to a milestone birthday next year. And these kind of times quite often are a time of reflection. When you look back, what are you most proud of, and what would you have liked to have done differently with that good old hindsight?
Oh, what I'm most proud of is, that kid from Loftus that just had a bit of a dream, and I went for it. I didn't let anything get in my way, and that's in a nice way. I didn't not believe. And when you talk about age, it's sometimes very difficult as we get older to find that self-belief. One would think that it becomes easier, but in fact, in my experience, it doesn't. I had such self-belief I willed it to happen. I had visions, and I didn't know where I wanted to be, but when I was gaining some traction and when I was opening the doors and whatever, it was because I was making it happen. And I don't know. I suppose any regrets. It's not really a regret, but it's sometimes very difficult to tap that belief, that self belief, and that youthful passion that we had, or at least I had, where it was, yeah. Do you know what I'm saying? I think
Yeah.
we question a bit more when we're older, and possibly because we're juggling more things, and there are perhaps more things that can go wrong. But I think that's what I'm most proud of. Um, and I also, I think it's very important to just to be a good person to work with. I think on a film set, I think I think you just need to listen and and be respectful of people. Um, yeah, I think you've got me with that one. Yeah, if anything, I suppose getting back to the roles that I wanted to play and the certain types of males that I wanted to portray, if I've been able to anchor them in any type of um, sensitivity and gentleness, the amount of times I've had directors say to me, "Man up," or "Can we beef him up a bit?" And it happened to me on A Place to Call Home on a couple of occasions, and I was incredibly offended by that. And then I looked at the invariably male directors who were telling me to do that. Then my answer was there. That's the men that they are. So if anything, if I can look through a thread of the role, if there's a thread throughout what I've done, if I've been able to bring a slightly different type of male on our screen, then I'd be proud to think I could have done that.
Mm.
It's easier now, by the way, but perhaps, but I always had that in my mind to just try and, I don't know, just try and color it with something, a little different, a little a little different, if that makes sense.
No, it does. Well, Brett, you are definitely in that group of truly Australian icons. Your roles have been unique and played with, I guess, that depth and precision that it's hard to imagine anyone else playing, roles like George Bly. You've built a legacy for the future stars coming through. And as you've got to work with people like Lorraine Desmond and Noni Hazelhurst and Marta Dusseldorp, others will now be able to have that privilege of saying that they got to work with Brett Climo. So that's awesome. I appreciate your time, your honesty, and sharing your experiences. Thank you for joining me today.
Aaron, thank you so much. It's been an absolute pleasure talking with you. I do appreciate it. Thank you.
No worries at all. Well, that was well respected as season actor Brett Climo, a real privilege, class all the way. Well, that's it for this podcast. For all the latest news, streaming information, ratings, TV guides, and podcasts, head to tvcentral.com.au. But for now, I'm Aaron Ryan. Thanks to Brett Climo. Bye for now.